Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Khalid. But today is the 4th of June 2025. These are the stories that we will be highlighting during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the success of the visit of the Pakistani delegation to the US, wherein many important members of this delegation, led by Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Saab and other senators as well, had very successful meetings with many important leaders, including the United Nations Secretary General, including the ministers from different important countries of the United Nations Security Council, with the OIC member states in the United Nations as well, and different other important leaders as well. The basic reason for sending this delegation was to apprise all the important leaders of Pakistan's version of the real facts and figures that have emerged post the Pahalgam false flag operation, and of course whether it be the Indian jingoism, Indian warmongering, or the media manipulation of events, and of course the core issue of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and the Indus Water Treaty have all been discussed during these important meetings. We'll be highlighting that, but we'll also be talking about the Modi government that is facing severe criticism for hiding the losses during the Operation Sindoor. The criticism is coming from the opposition, the criticism is coming from within, the criticism is now even coming from the media and from the common man, because slowly and steadily everybody is realizing the reality of the whole affair, that India has been mismanaging with its false pretensions, false accusations and false proofs. And more time passes and more people get apprised of the real facts and figures and what Pakistan has been propagating from day one. This is going to be our first segment, ladies and gentlemen. Our second story concerns the Middle East, particularly Gaza. Today is day 606. The number of casualties keeps on increasing. At least 95 Palestinians have been killed and 440 injured in attacks across Gaza in the past 24 hours. The Israeli military has also warned starving Palestinians, let me rephrase that, starving Palestinians in Gaza against approaching roads to the US-backed aid distribution sites run by the controversial GHF. I really wonder why. Or to add to that, the United Nations Security Council is set to vote on a resolution calling for a ceasefire and humanitarian access to Gaza. This is a measure that is expected to be vetoed by important nations of the UNSC. What will be the outcome of that? There's also an increasing amount of questions that are being raised by important members of the Western community, especially from the European Union. Will that reap any dividends? That is up for grabs. Let's see what the next couple of days have in store, at least for the Palestinians. But they are really suffering as nobody has suffered in the last 100 years. This is our second segment. Then finally we'll be talking about South Korea's new leader, who has vowed to heal wounds with its nuclear-armed north, that is the North Korea. New President Lee Jae-myung vowed to reach out to North Korea and to mend and heal the wounds. This is a very important gesture by the new South Korean leader, who also has said that he is going to take other measures for the benefit of the people of the Republic of Korea. How will that bode as far as South Korean relations with the West is also concerned, and also South Koreans people and how much they approve of these new decisions, will know in the next coming weeks and months as well. Let's begin our today, and of course this is with the visit of the US delegation, Pakistani delegation rather, to the US. In New York, the Pakistani delegation led by Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Saab met with many important leaders, including the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. That was one of their last meetings, but many other important meetings were also held to highlight that and Narendra Modi's criticism for hiding the true facts behind Operation Sindoor. We've been joined by two guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. In the studios, we've been joined by Saif Jamshed Barayar. He's a political analyst. He joins us for the first time. Welcome to Newsroom, Saif, and I hope this will be the first of many such visits to our show. Dr. Jameel Ahmed Khan, our dear friend, joins us online as well. He's a former ambassador and of course foreign affairs analyst. Dr. Jameel, thank you very much to have joined us, and thank you very much again to be part of this show. We'll begin with you, Saif. Saif, we've just talked about this high-level parliamentary delegation that is still in the US but was in New York, where it met with different important leaders and apprised them of the reality of the situation that concerns this very subcontinent. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab, Hina Rabbani Khar Sahiba, Senator Sharif Rahman, Jalil Abbas Shidani, Tahmina Janjua, Musaddiq Malik, Khurram Dastagir, Bushran Jumbat, Faisal Sabzwari. How effective is this decision taken by Pakistan to launch this engagement campaign in the US to counter Indian narrative?
Well, the fact of the matter is that we're living in a world of international diplomacy. And I think long gone are the days where gun was the resolution to something that happened. And we're living in the world where I think that if there is any conflict, whatever nature of the conflict, whether it's a bilateral territorial conflict, it's something that is India and Pakistan, it's something that's Russia and Ukraine, it's something that's the Gaza issue or the Palestinian crisis. I think the platform of dialogue is the only way out, number one.
True, agreed.
And for the very, first time I've witnessed in the past few years that the way in which the international world has responded to Pakistan's call for a greater diplomacy and for a greater dialogue, I think it reflects the very nature of the differential of political opinion and the differential of political resolve that exists on the Indian side and the Pakistani side. Since day one, in fact, we have been trying to say that we are willing to sit on the table, and human lives, no matter where they are lost, they are worth a condemnation.
Exactly.
That is something that should be the standard international law.
Agreed.
But the issue over here is that no matter how much we've been saying since 2016, India's response has been a very, let's say, a very unorthodox response. It has been a response of, I'd not say the conventions of humanity or the conventions of diplomacy, but it has been a response where maybe India wants to assert its pressure onto the regional arena, which it has totally lost, by the way. I genuinely do believe that it's the right time, or it's the high time for the Pakistani delegation to isolate India diplomatically at every political front. I think people like Bilawal Bhutto, who've represented Pakistan on international platforms, there's another former foreign minister here, Unabated Saiba as well, and I think people who are seasoned politicians, Shari Rahman Saiba and Khurram Dastagir Saab, I think with such credible sources of creating international dialogue, I think we'll be able to prove to the world that Pakistan is ever more stronger than before. Pakistan stands for peace. Pakistan stands for dialogue more than anything else. And you suspend the airspaces, you suspend the Indus Water Treaty, that by the international convention cannot be suspended. And then you have a unilateral approach of striking a nuclear power. That's not how winning is done in the world of diplomacy and dialogue. So I think so far so good. Recently the delegation has reached Washington as well.
Yes.
And it's a wonderful news because one of the biggest diplomatic blunders by the Indian government was that they tried to, filter out the US from the entire conflict. It was India who had called the international,
a fact that they have denied to this day.
Absolutely. And I think Mr. Shankar was in absolute denial. I think after...
Oh, he's not the only one who's in absolute denial.
After getting, I think, 6 air jets down. And I think you can never ask a man his salary, a woman her age, and the Indian Air Force, the number of jets that have been down recently. So I think it's not simply a physical defeat. It's not simply a territorial or a kinetic defeat. It's a diplomatic blunder and a defeat as well. And for days to come, I think...
I think it will be for more than days to come.
Certainly.
Jameel Ahmed Khan Sahab, thank you very much to have waited so patiently. One of the major, topics of discussion of this Pakistan delegation with all the leaders that it met was the post-false flag operation scenario that was created by India based on a false perspective, and of course then pinpointing Pakistan on different issues without a shred of evidence, and Indian weaponization of water through its unilateral hold on the Indus Water Treaty, which is a violation of international law and treaty obligations. Let's come to the meeting with the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. How significant is the Pakistan's outreach to the UNSC, the United Nations Secretary General, to expose India's unilateral aggression? Jameel Saab, I think you can't hear us. As soon as we do manage to tackle this little technical glitch, we'll come back to you. I'll ask you the same question. How significant is Pakistan's diplomatic outreach to the United Nations Secretary General and to apprise him of all that India has been doing, manipulating, especially since the 22nd of April?
I think a community of more than 193 members at the moment, a community that has given a clear-cut resolution not only on the Kashmiri issue, but has tried to play its very best effort in maintaining international peace and stability and elsewhere in the world as well. I think for the first time, the very first strategic front for international dialogue was the United Nations.
All right, we'll come back to that in detail, but after this short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. And of course, in Newsroom, we'll talking about the Pakistan delegation that is in the US as we speak, as well as Narendra Modi, who gets more and more exposed with every passing day. Jameel Ahmed Khan Saab, we had a little bit of a technical glitch, but now we're back with you in conversation. How significant do you feel is Pakistan's delegation's outreach to the different people that they've met, including the United Nations Secretary General? And how important is it to also highlight the Indian unilateral aggression?
No, well, I think this is the right time and the right kind of people who are representing Pakistan, and they are really presenting very cogent point to the world community at various strata of the diplomatic arena of the universe. Now, having said so, the press conference which Bilawal Bhutto Zardari conducted, in fact, he has presented all the points. The bilateral meeting with the permanent representatives of the Security Council, various countries, including China, Colombia, and there are about more than 7, 8 countries. Secretary General meeting, all multilateral reps of the world. Most of them were engaged during this
E10
visit
ambassadors as
of
well.
our team. Now, what all they covered, that's very logical. And that is in consistence with what we've been saying right from the very beginning, and that is starting from the 24th of the May, 24th May, once we first time issued a statement after the meeting of National Security Committee. And in that, we had mentioned about the Indus Water Treaty problem, and we had mentioned that this would be our existential threat. We had mentioned about Kashmir. We had mentioned that Pahalgam, we are ready for, on the same day, the PM had said that we are ready for the independent and transparent inquiry. So most of these points were revolving around these basic policy which was formulated and presented through that statement to the world. And now, in consistence with that, and with the more emphasis and the most significant point where the world community would definitely like to consider, not only consider, but get convinced that Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has said, okay, fine enough, let's have collaboration in the intelligence, let's combat terrorism together, and let's combat against the non-state actors. How can two nuclear neighbors be the hostage of the non-state actors on both sides? And so this is such a transparent policy statement given by the ex-foreign minister and the team leader of Pakistan to the entire world. And that seems very convincing, because the exposure which I had of several decades, interacting with the diplomatic community, I have seen that such points really sinks down into their minds and heart. Now, what impact is it going to have is more important. But before I proceed to another point, that what impact, because which probably the viewers would like to listen to, the Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, came up with an extempore answer to one of the questions of a presser, of the journalist, that Indus Valley civilization, they never go for aggression, and he cited an example that Mohenjo-daro, once it was dug, not a single weapon was recovered from Mohenjo-daro, and that shows that we are peaceful nation. We are the nation of Indus Valley civilization. They said so is the case with India. Now it's a choice of India whether they want to abide by that culture of the Indus Valley, or then obviously he described it, in a very convincing manner, that or the Modi, who can equate himself with Netanyahu, giving example of Gaza, And I said that the butcher of Gujarat and Kashmir, that is one side of it. The other side of it, both the nations should try and have a path where they are able to counter the terrorism and have some prosperity for their people, have some development for their people. So on these lines, and then he criticized the other team, that is Shashi Tahur's, the way he's presenting. He's showing the picture of a bearded person saying that he's a sanctioned person under 1267 Security Council Resolution 1267, and he says that that person is altogether different, and that's what the difference between Pakistan and India is. And what Pakistan team is doing now is that they are presenting a very logical and very cogent points in front of the cogent and convincing point to the world community. And that
is true. That is
I'm
true. But
sure
Ambassador Jamil, I'd like to understand something from the Indian perspective as well on all the backlash that Narendra Modi is now finally getting what he deserved. Is this backlash that the famed Indian Prime Minister is facing over Operation Sindoor a clear indication that the Indian narrative, whether it be the war narrative or its narrative concerning Pakistan, was built on lies, political gains, and military cover-ups?
No, he gave an example. Bilawal Bhutto gave an example to this, an answer in the example, and that example was that it took them one complete month to accept that their Rafale aircraft were down, and for the entire 1 month they were hiding the facts from their own people as well as the world. So that shows how truthful was the narrative of India. So that I think very well responded, and in a very extempore manner responded to that question also. And he also mentioned that we had locked, and that shows about our capability, our military capability, our air force capability. He said that the world knows, and why he said so? Because there's always electronic signature of any such locking the target by another aircraft by another country. He says that there were about 20 aircrafts were locked, but we only shot down 7. Initially we thought 6, but locked down 7, and then we engaged them, we neutralized them because they had they are the one they had released their load. Means they had released their bombs to our civilian society, and that's why we had to really bring them down. And that again, the word these days, it's not a word of the words that you can hide behind your words and behind your narrative. It's the electronic signature in such matter. The world, the military experts, they have that the capability to really gauge who is right and who is wrong. So this time around, I think and then the best point which I found, which we have, the Pakistani team has really presented and pitched, is they said, well, India, this violation of international law, not accepting international law, would continue this tension between the two nuclear armed nations. And it's not matter of if, when it is and when the war is going to happen. It basically, he wanted to tell the world that the war is we are at the stage where the war can take place, or the two countries can get engaged into it. Because he did mention that on one side, no one less than the prime minister of a country, nuclear armed country, says either you have bread or have my bullet. That is obviously not expected from a prime minister or a head of state of the country.
It's true, but the fact is, Jamil Ahmed Khan Sahab, there are so many things that confound us when it comes to Indian attitude towards Pakistan, and it's all its manipulations, its falsehoods to malign Pakistan one way or the other. When this is a region that could have prospered so much had India not resorted to what it has been doing since the last decade. Thank you very much, Jamil Ahmed Khan Sahab, to have joined us, to have given us your very valued output as far as this important issue is concerned. Saif, I want quick answers to that. First of all, the delegation concludes its visit to New York with a clear message that Pakistan desires peaceful, cooperative relations with all its neighbors that is based on equality and mutual respect. Ishaq Dar Saab says we are ready for dialogue, but we are not desperate for it. How important are these statements as well to highlight Pakistan's point of view on the future of the subcontinent?
Omar, this simply stands for the fact that Pakistan since day one has been trying to tell to the world that we can defend ourselves, we can defend our waters as well, we can defend our people as well, our airspace as well. But the issue at hand is that if there is an escalation and it doesn't de-escalate, it can lead to the annihilation of more than 1.6 billion people. That's the truth that the world is facing right now. And the world has, seen disastrous outcomes of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the world doesn't want that to happen again. The second thing is, I'll not be talking about my country's successes right now. I'll be deconstructing very quickly India's diplomatic and physical failures. The first thing is that they failed to admit that they physically lost a couple of jets until international observers quoted the statement and they were humiliated in front of the world.
And then the CDS also then admitted to it.
Certainly. The second thing over here is, and he openly admitted it in front of a foreign news channel. Bloomberg. And that's a very credible source of information.
Yes.
Now, let's come on to the second point. The second point is that the stakeholders that Pakistan was approaching since day one, I'm talking about China, I'm talking about Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, I'm talking about Iran, the regional stakeholders, and of course, the United States that has been a long-standing partner in all goods and bads with us. So Pakistan has taken a very refined strategy to take this dialogue of diplomacy one step further. Where is India standing? India is in Colombia, India is in Brazil. Now, if you're more interested...
And their members are singing songs during their meetings.
This is a very scattered foreign policy and amazing to see. And startling to see that a person like Shashi Tharoor, once imagined as a voice of sanity for the Indian diplomacy and dialogue in front of the world, today his own party is not happy with him. I think that with all that fake concocted English accent...
All right, last question, because we have to shift to the next segment. Rahul Gandhi comes very strongly against Narendra Modi. He talks of Modi's surrender policy and diplomatic failures. Will it have any effect on the current government?
Surely and certainly. Let me give you a prediction loud and clear. The BJP government is about to lose the election. The only thing that they wanted to do was that they were not economically delivering, socially delivering. They had isolated two very large ethnicities in India since the past 10 years. The revival of Hindutva, it has crashed down to the rubble, and I see the Indian National Congress making its space once again in the Indian politics, and I think that's something good for us as well. At least we'll be having a few sane voices to talk over the table with, rather than, responding
sane
to...
voices, that is a long way to go as far as India is concerned. Let's see what happens. But nevertheless, I think this is a huge setback, as our information minister said, politically, diplomatically, militarily, and also from the point of view of the media. They have been defeated on all of these fronts. Let's come to our second story that concerns the Middle East and Gaza. And today is day 606, where at least 95 Palestinians have been killed, 440 injured in the last 24 hours alone. The UNSC, the United Nations Security Council, is set to get together and to discuss the future of Palestine as far as humanitarian access and ceasefire is concerned. And of course, more is happening as well, different countries with their different stances. We've been joined online by Matthew Bryza, former ambassador, White House official. Matthew, thank you very much to have joined us. Long time coming. I hope everything is fine on your end of things. Let's begin with Matthew Miller. Another Matthew. He openly admits while talking to Sky News about the Israeli aggression and the Israeli policies, now that of course he's no longer part of the government that is in the US. How much of an impact is this going to have in the short and long run?
Hello?
Matthew, can you hear us? We'll move to Saif again before we move to Matthew. Maybe by that time our technical glitch would have been taken care of. 95 Palestinians, Saif, have been killed, 440 injured in the last 24 hours. Gaza's government's media office accuses Israel of a horrific, intentionally repeated crimes, saying that it has deliberately lured Palestinians to 8 centers run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and then killed 102 of them in the last 8 days alone. 16,500 of them are children. Is there an end in sight?
The reality is that according to the Geneva Convention and according to the International Human Rights Convention as well, you cannot attack any person from an international non-governmental organization. You cannot attack any relief worker in any particular place. Now, you refer to it as war crimes. I think this is larger than war crimes. This is a complete genocide. This is
crimes against humanity.
This is in fact a genocide against humanity, and I don't think that the Zionist state has actually recovered from its own wounds of the past, and I think they're repeating their own history on someone else this time. The total population of Gaza, a very densely populated strip, was 2.2 million 1 year ago, and now it stands at 2.13 million. 70,000 people have been killed, and alarmingly, most of the casualties have been women and children under the age of 25. Now, this is the worst of genocides that the world has seen in the past.
And deliberate, so as to eradicate as much of the new generation as possible.
And there is no filter on this genocide. I'll not say it's a war. It's a genocide where there is no filter. You're striking ambulances, you're striking hospitals. 36 hospitals were functioning in Gaza a year ago, and now not even a single one is functioning. You're killing children in front of their own parents. You're shooting at point blank range with sniper rifles and this and that. And I think the international community for once needs to realize that if not today we stand for Gaza, tomorrow it will be someone else.
It could be one of their own countries.
Absolutely, it will be someone else. And for that fear, I think that the international community needs to first identify that Netanyahu needs to be tried as a war criminal. We've tried many war criminals in the past as well. And I think genocide or killing humanity is something that cannot be forgiven.
I really hope so, because the way things are going, and we are on day 606, and the way things are moving forward, I want to be optimistic, but I continue to remain cautiously optimistic. Matthew, I hope you can hear us well now. Matthew, can you hear us now?
Yeah, your sound is breaking up, but I can hear you when you spoke like that very well. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to be loud, and I'm going to be clear, and I'm going to be slower in my conversation with you. Former U.S. official, former U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller, who was part of the Biden administration, acknowledges that Israel committed war crimes, and I'll quote him. He says that we condemn the condemnation, confirm its crimes, and expose the U.S. administration's attempts to obscure the truth about. Of course, Miller recently told this British broadcaster Sky News that it was without a doubt true, quote unquote, without a doubt true that Israel had committed war crimes in Gaza. Is this an admission too late in the day?
I don't really think it's that much newsworthy, because what he actually said, at least based on the accounts that I've read in the Washington Post and elsewhere, was that, yes, of course, Israeli soldiers committed war crimes. And we all know that. I mean, that's obvious for the world to see. We see the tragic video every day over and over of the hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians who've been murdered by Israeli troops. But Matthew Miller was careful in that he also said he didn't say he believes that this was a systematic policy approach by Israel. In other words, he was saying there are some soldiers that need to be held accountable, but it's not Netanyahu's policy necessarily. And he also didn't pronounce on whether or not he agrees that what Israel is doing is conducting a genocide. So he was measured, and he basically was saying what we already know. Of course, Israeli soldiers are committing war crimes. Now, but he did say one other important thing that suggests that he doesn't agree with the Biden administration's approach, but had to go along with it. He said, as the press spokesman, he didn't have the leeway or the freedom to comment according to his own opinions, and he had to follow the official opinion of the Biden administration. And that's exactly what the function of a press spokesman is. It's not to tell the spokesman or spokeswoman's truth. It's to tell the view and the official policy of the administration. So he suggests with that remark that he doesn't agree with the Biden administration's approach to Israel-Gaza, but he doesn't state that explicitly.
I understand what you're trying to say, but the fact is also, there are limits to which a country needs to stand by another country and watch the other country, go on a rampage as far as the killings are concerned, and everybody is talking about a genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes. But it's important to set a red line as to where you stand with another country and where you don't. I think that is very important in any relationship, whether it be US, Israel or any other relationship. Well, Matthew, the United Nations Security Council is set to vote on a resolution for ceasefire and humanitarian access to Gaza. What could be the outcome in your point of view? Is it again going to be vetoed?
Well, first of all, I think that such a UN Security Council statement is way overdue. Israel has been violating international humanitarian law for years, since shortly after the horrific Hamas attacks on October 7th. And by the way, there should be much more criticism of those attacks. But from the moment that Israel restricted flows of food and medicines and fuel and water and any humanitarian goods into Gaza, it was already violating international humanitarian law. And what has been happening in recent days is atrocious. I mean, it really does look like Israel, through this this new organization in partnership with the U.S., the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is actually using food as bait to attract starving Palestinians to the food donations and then to kill them. That has got to be condemned by the UN Security Council. I hope the U.S. won't veto that resolution. I think that everybody else on the Security Council, I think, will be eager to vote in favor of it. And so, at the end of the day, the only country that really matters, though, to Israel is the United States. And I'd just like to add that President Trump has been showing more than dissatisfaction with Netanyahu. He's been humiliating Netanyahu diplomatically. So you'll recall that when President Trump announced a couple of months ago, when Netanyahu was in the Oval Office, that Trump, would reinstate direct talks between the U.S. and Iran. Netanyahu was stunned. He clearly had not been consulted on that move. And then not only did Trump not visit Israel in his recent Middle East trip, but when his team and his envoy, Steve Witkoff, conducted negotiations for the release of that last American hostage, they did it with Hamas, a terrorist organization, and not with Israel. And in my lifetime, that has never happened. The U.S. policies have always been, you don't negotiate with terrorists. And also, when it came to issues like this in Gaza, always the president would consult with the Israeli leader, and Trump did not. So these are very powerful diplomatic signals being sent by Trump of a toughening stance. Hopefully, it'll be tough enough to vote yes on that Security Council resolution.
What about GHF? You talked yourself about the Gaza, so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and how it's luring the people and how they are killing them once they lure them towards food, which is again a form of genocide and war crime as well. Will there be a stop to the GHF in the coming days, in your point of view, because of the continued pressure that is now coming from the Western states, including many in the EU?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, as of today, the GHF stopped. I mean, it's a one-day pause, and the official statement says or claims that it's some mumbo jumbo. They need to increase the efficiency of the operation, something that makes no sense. In reality, the Boston Consulting Group, which is the sort of technical architect of the scheme, has disassociated itself now, has quit the whole GHF, as has its director. So I think the GHF is dying. It's dying a political and operational death. And it's clear that Israel has misused it. Not only the worst thing is what we already talked about as bait for killings, but also is restricting access to the food distribution points, calling those streets and roads combat avenues. And so Israel's playing a very cruel game with this GHF, and it really seems clear that the GHF was never really intended to help the Palestinians.
I think that is more clear than ever. But the fact is, Matthew, that about 50,000 pregnant and nursing women are at serious risk in Gaza due to the shortage of food and essential medicines. So are the children, so are the elderly. And to add to that is the whole, lack of medicine and the bombardment of the majority of the hospitals that has led to the medical, facilities or capacities really at a tail end. Let's put it that way. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has highlighted this and more, and so many people are also talking about it. Will the people get any kind of relief in the coming days? What needs to be done in order to at least give them that relief? Give them food, give them water, give them medicine, give them the health supplies that they need.
Yeah, I think every reasonable person who's not an extreme Israeli nationalist would totally agree with what you said, and that would be I would hold in that count the entire Biden administration and Trump administration. So it's a question of practicality, military and operational practicality. The U.S., as you'll recall, in the Biden administration, tried some ways to get around Netanyahu's intransigence on delivering aid to the Palestinians. There were airdrops, and those were stopped because in some cases, poor innocent people on the ground were killed when the packets landed on them. And then there was that ill-fated pier that was supposed to bring in from the sea, offload onto trucks from ships, aid to the Palestinians. The pier broke up in the water. So as long as Israel refuses to work with the UN, with UNRWA, and others to bring in the assistance, the only alternative would be some sort of a military operation led by I guess the United States, against Israeli forces. And that's something nobody wants to conduct as a purely practical matter. So I think that the only way that this gets resolved is if the U.S. really applies, the U.S. it has to be, applies massive pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu, political, but also military assistance. I mean, without the weaponry that comes from the U.S., the Israeli military cannot conduct these operations. Now, would be a gigantic shift in U.S. policy, in the history of U.S. relations with Israel. And such a shift would come against the backdrop of something not a lot of people outside the U.S. are reporting, which is a big increase in anti-Semitic attacks in the United States, including, as you may have seen, the murder of two Israelis, diplomatic officials in Washington, D.C. by a gentleman from my hometown, Chicago, who was simply yelling, "Free Palestine." And then, by the way, in Boulder, Colorado last week, there was that crazy sort of flamethrower attack by a man born in Egypt against people protesting for the release of the Israeli captives or Israeli hostages in Gaza.
You know, there are so many kinds of repercussions of what is happening, and the repercussions are not going to stop unless and until there is a stop to what is happening within Palestine by the Israelis. Thank you very much, Matthew. Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Bryza, former ambassador, White House official, talking to us and discussing the latest highlights as far as this whole escalation of this barbarism and crimes against humanity in Palestine is concerned. Thank you again, Matthew, to have joined us. It's a pleasure always to talk to you. Seth, coming to you. Total number of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli custody has gone beyond 10,400. Majority are those that have been captured from the West Bank. What is the Israeli plan vis-a-vis the occupied West Bank as well?
I think the plan is to control absolute gain of the territory. I think with the sub-autonomous status of that territory, Israel cannot, I think, execute its political plans for consolidation of the entire region. The very idea is that they launched the Gaza offensive first so they could make ground for West Bank. Previously there was a little sentiment on the West Bank as well that maybe through a little bit of dialogue things could come to resolution. But what Israel has done in the Gaza Strip in the past 1 year, I think that calls for reintrospection into its plans for West Bank as well. The ultimate
we unfortunately have to come to an end of this show. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new stories that pertain to us in Pakistan. Allah Hafiz.